Good morning. Welcome to the Life Group. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to read through some of the announcements. So on April 27th, there's going to be a joint deacons and elders meeting. That is today. And it's going to be at 4 p.m. There is mission team training for all the mission trips is going to be on Sunday, May 4th at 1 p.m. There's going to be a hamburger lunch to help with fundraising. It could be $10 per plate. Let them know with the response tab if you're interested in attending that. The mission trip opportunities that we're going to be going on this year is going to be Chicago in May. That's $300. Mexico in June, and that's $1,100. Application to be turned in by May 1st, coming up quickly. On May the 11th, there's going to be child dedication during the morning worship. If you're interested, fill out a response tab with your child's name and age. There's going to be an informational meeting with a representative from Trail Life USA, which is kind of like the Christian version of Scouts. That'll be on May the 17th at 8 a.m. If you're interested in that, let them know. We'll have a graduate fellowship on May the 18th after the morning worship service. They want to, they're doing kindergarten, senior, and college graduates. And so let us know in the response tab pending that. And then they're asking if you can send a video with your students sharing what they want to be when they grow up or what college they plan to do or career choice after either high school or college. If you're interested in a CPR certification class on a Saturday morning, they're trying to see if there's enough interest in class for that CPR. It'll be a 4-hour class, cost $80 per person. Okay. Deal. 2 years. Okay. Like I have. Here the building today. Corey's got a birthday on the 30th of April. All right. Anything else anybody wants to say? All right. I'm going to open us in prayer and start it. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this opportunity to come into your house and study your word and dive deeper in how you fight for us and how you do us when we may trail away from you, draw us closer. Put the words in my mouth to say that I learned from the lesson throughout the rest of the day. In your name I pray. Amen. All right. So, got this written on the board. I don't know if you can see it. It says, even though blank, God still blank. And so, how would you personally fill in the blank there? This is kind of like your testimony. So something God's So even when we don't make the mark, God is still blessing or providing for need. Yeah, and that's very appropriate for the lesson that we're studying. We're talking about Samson. So even though I'm weak, God is still strong. That's where the strength comes from. Oh, there you go. I guess I got a little check too. Read Bible daily. Then studied the lesson. And then act D group. and then memory verse. Hebrews 11. Says, and without faith it is impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek. All right, anybody else have any other testimonies about even though something we've done, God still does something? Mm. Yep, that's it, faith aspect. Can't see what's in front of you, but God knows the plan and has a. Okay. So the title of this week's lesson is God Intervenes for His People. The core passage, Judges 16, verses 4 through 5 and 16 through 30. So the context for the lesson is that Samuel was the final, or Samson, I don't know why I can't. Samson was the final deliverer of Israel described in the book of Judges. The story occurs in three parts. First, in Judges 13, an angel appeared to a barren woman and said she would have a son set apart for the Lord's service as a Nazarene. Then in Judges 14 to 15, when Samson was grown, he married a Philistine woman and clashed with the Philistines. Finally, in Judges 16, Samson became involved with Delilah, who ultimately betrayed him. Through it all, Samson's unconventional judgeship showed that God's purposes cannot be thwarted. And so the concept is that we want to focus on is God can vindicate his people even through the seeming hopelessness of death. And as we're looking through this, we need to understand that when we take God lightly, we drift further from God and deeper into sin. And remember that God can use anything, even our failures, to accomplish his good purposes for his life. Okay, so hopefully we can all look back at our lives and see God at work, even in the most difficult circumstances. But what if that difficult circumstance were God's chosen leader? That's exactly what was going on in the story of God's last judge. We could fill in the blanks this way. Even though Samson ignored God, God still proved he was with him. So the judges that the Lord raised up to deliver Israel mirrored more and more the corruption and idolatry that permeated the nation of Israel. Barak was hesitant, Gideon was fearful, and he set the people up for idolatry. Jephthah made a foolish vow that resulted in sacrificing his daughter. Then we come to Samson, who lived near, tolerated, and lived more like the Philistines he was raised up to defeat. So Samson's life is a story of God's faithfulness, even from the time before he was conceived. God endowed him with amazing strength. Samson allowed his love for himself and his own desires to take the place of his love for God. We see no attempt by Samson to rid his life of sin, yet God used this mighty warrior for his purpose. Still, every sin comes to judgment. In today's focal passage, we see that God allowed Samson's demise to come at the hands of Delilah and the Philistines. Yet with his final breath, Samson did cry out to God in faith, discovered God's presence. Though it seemed the Philistines had the final victory, it was God who received glory. Okay, so what we're going to look at as we go through the different passages that we're going to focus on is we're going to reflect on Samson's struggle with the Philistines and try to correlate this with times in our own life where we may have fell short, but God was still victorious. So we need to think about what went wrong and then how God was victorious. So let's start with Judges 16, verses 4 through 15. Anybody want to read that out loud? Yes. It's not all in one. It's like 4 through 5, and then it skips 6. Yep. Okay. So Samson's story is not merely the narrative of one individual. He reflected Israel as a whole. So, like the Israelites as a nation, Samson pursued foreign women and was led away from his calling by in this case, Delilah. Many people today, even people that we love, may attempt to sway believers to disobey God. Jesus warned that we are like sheep amid wolves. So, unlike Samson, we must strive for wisdom and innocence in our relationship. So it doesn't say whether Delilah was a Philistine or not, but obviously tell where her allegiance. She cared more about money than she did about Samson. Took 1,100 pieces of silver from each Philistine leader, and there was probably 5 of them to betray Samson. This was an immense value of payment, and when you compare that with other biblical transactions, Abram paid 400 pieces of silver for a burial plot, and David paid 50 pieces of silver for an ox and a threshing, adding up over 5,000 silver got praise. Obviously, this was a big deal. Samson's relationship with Delilah was sinful because of implied immorality, but also because he did not worship the Lord. That was also the problem with Israel's pursuit. They led the nation into idol worship. God still warns people against entering close relationships of life, including marriage, with people who do not love Him. We should engage with and love the world, but marrying someone who does not follow the Lord generally does not work out well, because there can be no true partnership, righteousness and law. So what are some common ways the enemies of God attempt way Christians sin. Yeah. Kind of permeate the brain. Mm. Well, I feel like they cast, they're not tied in reading the Bible or tied in with other Christians. They them cast doubt in your mind, say, does the Bible really say that, or do you really think that that's what it means? Really believe that? And then if you're not strong relationship with other Christians, kind of weigh your mind over to that side. Mm. Yeah, because if you're taking advice on major life, not Christian, they're not going. They're going to get worldly step, make choices. Mm. Yeah. Mm. And the and that's what us talk. Time more time you spend away from common belief, or harder it is his voice know what you're supposed to. Mm. Yep. Take you down a path. Yeah. So Samson's strength was a gift from God, but Samson treated it like a toy for his own vengeance and entertainment. 3 times Samson played a dangerous game with Delilah. He asked the source of his strength. He lied and escaped from her attempts to subdue him, but finally her nagging wore him down, and then he eventually revealed the strength fourth time. At, he asked, giving his heart to an ungodly woman. It may seem puzzling that Samson's hair was the key to his strength. His hair was not magic, as in the fictional story of Rapunzel. Samson's strength was a gift of the sovereign Lord. Maintaining it was contingent upon his obedience. God's simple command was that no razor touch Samson's head. When Samson took that commandment lightly, the consequences of disobedience were severe. Still today, God's power in believers' lives diminishes when we make a habit of unrepentant sin. So, how have you experienced a diminished fellowship with God because of disobedience in your life? Mm. Like, too, if you're not in a close relationship and coming into church and you have unconfessed sin or unrepentant sin, and you're coming in, it's almost like there's like a sour taste in your mouth, like you're like Dad said it, sucking on lemons coming to church, because because you're not feeling in harmony or in fellowship with people that are here, because you have things in your life you haven't confessed or turned over. Let's see. Uh-huh. Yeah. Sometimes it's not a whisper. That's what I say. That's the further you drift away, it can become loud and clear. Um, so why do you think God used Samson despite his sinful? That's right. Yeah, I feel like that's the whole Old Testament. As we're going through this, we're just sitting there going, why in the world do they keep making the same mistakes over and over? But then you look at your life and you're like, well, what do I do? Do the same thing day after day, or month after month. I keep falling in the same ruts. And well, yep. So we have to make sure that we are understanding that sinful living is not okay with God, even if He accomplishes His purpose. So, like it's not that He's condoning the fact that we're sinning. I think He's showing that He's all powerful and His will be done, regardless of whether we partake and receive the blessing from them, because He's called believers to righteousness. Okay, so we're going to move on to God can even use death and discipline to accomplish His purposes for our good. So if somebody wants to read 21 through 30, we're going to see Samson's final moments and kind of see how he can experience victory. So at this point, Samson had found himself at the lowest point of his life, abandoned by God, bereft of strength, and humiliated as a Philistine slave. His situation was a warning to Israel: repent or face a similar fate, conquered and humiliated by the. So, how we connect this in a greater theological sense is that although uh, similar to Christ's humiliation, although God the Son was equal with God and worthy of all the glory God received, he chose to humble himself by taking on human flesh. He left his glorious state and came in the likeness of sinful flesh and experienced the humiliating death on the cross by becoming sin for us so that in him we might become the righteous. Though Samson failed God, he knew it was not too late to cry out to God for help. So Samson prayed, displaying reverence for God by calling him Lord God. What Samson did was what Israel needed to do. They needed to cry out to God from their low point of humiliation and sin. We need to do the same when we feel ourselves drifting and facing his loving hand of discipline. As long as we are living, it is never too late to call on. So Samson's prayer reminds us of God's grace. In Hebrew, the prayer consisted of 18 words, including 5 first-person pronouns, me, I, and my. Even as he began turning to the Lord, Samson remained focused on himself. Still, the Lord acted on his behalf. The lesson is clear. God delights when his people come to him, even if they come with a measure of spiritual immaturity. So this is the question that's in the lesson. It says, when has God answered your plea for help despite spiritual immaturity? But how often do we hear people that say, oh, I can't come to church because I'm not like this, so, or I haven't gotten myself to that place to be able to come to church. That's not something, God wants us to turn to him even at the lowest. Like, you don't have to fix yourself before you come to God. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to be pastor or the the top elder or deacon or whatever to come in, pray, and ask God to help you. Because even if you look at like what it's talking about with Samson's prayer, it was very. It wasn't like he was, Lord, save Israel or do this and help us defeat the Philistines. It was, Lord, strengthen me so I can pay them back for gouging my eyes out. One last. So it was still a very selfish prayer that he had, but God was still able to use him and use his, even though he didn't save him personally, he used his death to accomplish great things. I mean, what did it say? He killed more with his death than those he did his whole entire life fighting Philistines. So it was still a very powerful moment he was able to use. Mm-hmm. Yep. So Samson's death demonstrates that God hears and uses even those of weak and tainted faith. New Testament, Samson is counted among the heroes, having by faith gained strength and weakness. God can use anyone for his purpose. So, like I said, this complex, I feel like church, God can't use me. I may not be as strong in praying, or I may not have read the Bible or know it from cover to cover, and you don't have to be this. hero of faith to be able to be used by God. God can use anyone on willing to be. So Samson reminds us of New Testament believers who were used by God despite their faithlessness and foolishness. Peter denied Jesus yet became a mighty preacher and evangelist. Thomas doubted Christ's resurrection, yet he ended up being an apostle. John Mark abandoned Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey, yet he later wrote the gospel. In your failures, cry out to God and remember that no life is too far gone to be lost. So what are some ways that God might bring good out of discipline and failure? I mean, we look at the entire Old Testament like what we're doing. We're seeing discipline and we're seeing failure over and over again, and what we're able to do is apply it to our lives and realize that even though we fail and we need discipline, God can still grow and become stronger. Yeah. All right. So, how do we connect this to the gospel? This is through the crucifixion and death of Jesus. Though it seemed hopeless, God resurrected Jesus to further reveal his divinity and accomplish the work of salvation on behalf. So that's another obvious way that God uses something that seemed hopeless, accomplish purpose. You know, like experience with Easter, going through and remembering that, how terrible Friday was, and Jesus was crucified, and how all of the disciples, believers at that time must have felt when he was in that tomb. God used that to correct and conquer sin on our behalf, give us salvation. Okay, so now we're going to try to go through this, see how this works as far as what went wrong and how was God victorious. So three things. So we talk about with Samson, what went wrong with Samson. Yeah. 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 I don't. I think it was a. Well, I think it was that his parents had he was a Nazarite. So he was destined to be set apart, and that's set apart was given to him was no razor to touch his head. No, supposed to tell them. Not that I'm. Uh, okay, so what went wrong with the Philistines? What went wrong with the Philistines? I think they thought they had victory, right? They were celebrating. They thought that they could conquer God's people by buying their way. Maybe they were also worshiping a false god. Okay. So the the tricky thing here was not that there was anything magical about Samson's hair when they cut it off. It was the whole point was that he had been unfaithful to God's call, and he did not have his faith in the Lord, and that when the Lord left him, that's when his strength was not through his hair. It was more just a symbol of his covenant with God. And so as he had become unfaithful and shared that secret that he was not supposed to, that's when the Lord left him, strength left. So the Philistines perceived their victory over Samson and his humiliation as a strength of their God, which is why they were, offering burnt offerings to their Dagon. But their victory was only possible because Israel's God allowed it. So God once again revealed his power over the Philistines when he allowed Samson to destroy them. So that there, we talk about how God was victorious, is that he used Samson in this weakened, frail state to conquer things when they thought they had achieved victory. So, we're last section of this is how you apply this to your life is, when, and this is how we started the lesson, was even though we did something wrong, God still accomplished the purpose. So, this is basically how you use your testimony, is like, even though I've gone through this, I put my faith in God, and God still is able to accomplish purpose. So just think about, and continue to reflect on times when God proved himself victorious in spite of our own sin and shortcomings. So how does the gospel of Jesus compare to this pattern of victory despite defeat? How does the gospel of Jesus compare to this pattern of victory despite defeat? Mm, yeah. Mm. Well, and I feel like that's the way that God likes to work, is like when we're at our lowest point, you can't point to anyone else other than him. He got you that. It's not like, you can boast and beat on your chest and say, oh, well, this is why I was blessed, or why God was victorious in this situation. I did this and this. He used me, a flawed, weak person, to help uh, get this message out, or accomplish this victory. And then when you're talking about the gospel of Jesus, is what we talk about. I mean, like, I'm sure the Romans, the Pharisees, all of them thought that okay, we finally accomplished what we wanted to. We got rid of Jesus. We don't have to hear him talking about this, saying he's the Son of God anymore. That's our victory. And they looked like they thought they had won. And then as he was resurrected from the dead and going out, I'm sure that it was evident that God was victorious, and wasn't man. Yep. Yeah. Definitely. independent. Mm. Well, and think about it. Say, how many times Delilah asked Samson to reveal his secret and to tell where's your strength come from, and how, and I mean he tricked her multiple times, and then eventually get worn down, and so I feel like that's part of the point of this lesson, that you're in the world and you're there is it's easy to get worn down, and then you rely on your own strength, and you're not getting refreshed, renewed from God, and that's when you fail, because you start putting lean on your own strength. And the world will most definitely wear you down when you in the world. So we may find it tempting to look down on Samson, but we must remember that he was a product of his environment, just like we are. So we should not allow the world to form our mindset. According to Paul, we should not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Samson had the Spirit of God within him and still ignored the Spirit's leadership while abusing the Spirit's strength. Even at his lowest point, which was his death, Samson turned back to the Lord in faith and prayer. None of us is too far gone to cry out to God and know that he hears us. All right. So as we're thinking about how we're going to apply this lesson going forward throughout the week, so with our head, we need to think about that disobedience can develop as a pattern in our lives. Samson sinned repeatedly in his relationships with women, and his spiritual apathy contributed to his ultimate downfall. It is important for believers today to consider areas in which we are susceptible to being tempted to disobey God. Knowing our weak areas positions us to rely on God and grow more faithful. So what you need to think about this week is, what are some areas of your life where you are most susceptible to disobeying God? With our hearts for followers of Christ, discipline is a blessing that God uses to accomplish his purposes in our lives. The withdrawal of God's presence provoked Samson to cry out to the Lord. Painful events in your life, sometimes the consequences of sin, can move you to cry out to God as well. Though discipline is unpleasant, we should recognize it as a gracious gift when it leads us to increased obedience. I don't think there's anybody that likes discipline or being corrected, but especially those of us with kids, you know that what you're doing with discipline is trying to help shape behavior and growth in the right direction, not just for enjoyment. That's what William told me the other day. Y'all just like seeing me cry. What hardships are you currently facing that God may want to use in refining your character? That's definitely a perspective shift in life as we start looking at, oh my gosh, why am I having to go through this over and over, and the woe is me type mentality, as opposed to, well, what is God trying to teach me through the difficult season of life? How can I grow and become stronger in my faith? And that's definitely a paradigm. With our hands, the other believers in your church and your group may be experiencing deep hardship. In that hardship, they need reminders that God helps and vindicates his people even through the most hopeless situation. They also need reminders that a life of obedience is worth the effort. So consider how a card, text message, or a call from you might encourage someone going through a difficult season to keep obeying God. And that's a big part of why coming to church, doing life together, all these groups, things we do, is important, is because we're trying to tell people, hey, don't be conformed to the world. Don't slip into those relationships with people in the world and lose your touch with God and what he's trying to teach you. But then if they're coming to church and they're not experiencing that fellowship with other Christians, you're not reaching out and investing in their lives, and then it almost makes it where it's not they're not seeing that, and it's not as real for them. So we need to think about how we can encourage others to live a life of obedience toward God. And that, mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a good point to point out too. Is not only saying, "Hey, it's okay. God still uses you even when you do have it." And that was one of the things that wanted to make sure we talked about was that uh, not to encourage sinful behavior by saying, "Well, God's still going to use you regardless." It's saying you could have greater things done with you through your life if you obey and you're obedient. But even if you're not, God's still going to accomplish His purpose. So you're not going to be able to see those blessings in on earth. Mm. Yeah. No, that's why coming to church regularly, studying, reading your Bible, that it just keeps slapping you in the face over and over and saying, "Hey, why are you not paying attention? This is I'm trying to tell you. Listen and be obedient." It's because the world doesn't believe that, and we're out there in the world more than we are in church building, and which is where we need to be, is out there trying to share the gospel. But um, if it's easy to fall into that discouragement, not surrounded by godly people. Okay. All right. We'll go through the prayer list. So on the prayer side, we've got Brenda Beard family, Ronald and Judy Gregg, Caleb and Troy, Lori and James, Michelle Whitehouse, Melanie Jones, Sean Self, Courtney Gitter, Amanda, William, and Delilah Hutchins, Christy and Robbie Leanhart, Dakota and Eric Drake. Pray for Aunt Mick for safe travels. Let's see. This is J Truth and family, Lisa Sykes, Mitch and Katie Corley, Jordan, Jamie and the boys, and Sam graduating. That's a prayer and a praise. Barrett, and he has some exams and studies coming up. Mexico missions and Anthem for Aswell. And then on the praise side, we've got Caleb and Troy for traveling, and James on the praise. Anybody have anything else we need to pray for? Yeah. Look, I have to read my own handwriting, so I'll come back a few days later and be like, I don't even know what I meant to. All right, so let's see. We're gonna read through Psalms 39 verses 7 through 13. That's gonna be our prayer for the week that we need to focus on. Psalms 39 and verses 7 through 13. So I'll read it. It says, and now, Lord, what do I hope in? My expectation is in you. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Make me not the reproach of the wicked fool. I have become mute. I do not open my mouth because it is you who have done it. Remove your plague from me because of the opposition of your hand. I am wasting away. With reproofs you chasten a man for iniquity. You consume as a moth what is precious to him. Surely every man is vanity. Hear my prayer, O Yahweh, and give ear to my cry for help. Do not be silent at my tears. for I am a sojourner with you, a foreign resident like all my fathers. Turn your gaze away from me, that I may smile again before I go and am no more. All right, that is the end of our lesson, and we will do worship service in a few minutes. Thank you.